For today's topic, since you guys really like the interpretations and hidden meanings in the cartoons, today I'm going to be doing another one, and I'm going to be doing Rick and Morty. So the episode that I'll be talking about and interpreting is episode 10 from season 7. This one is called Fear No More, where Rick and Morty go to the Carnival of Nightmares and realize that nothing really scares them anymore because of all the things that they've seen from their adventures. A man in a suit comes up to them and overhears them talking about how nothing is scaring them and offers to take them to a place on Earth called the Fear Hole. So the purpose of this fear hole is to go in and it manifests all your greatest fears in order for you to conquer them and come out fearless. So this episode got really crazy, and it was really interesting seeing them come to the realization of all of their fears. So we're going to be going in and talking about this episode, dissecting it a little bit, and there's a lot of really deep hidden messages in there. So if you're interested, let's get into it. So this fear hole was literally inside the bathroom of like a restaurant, and when they went in, the guy was letting them know, like, once you come out of the fear hole, if you make it and you conquer your fears, you get a picture on this Hall of Fame or whatever. There was only like 2 or 3 people up there. So Rick was kind of skeptical. He wasn't really wanting to go into it after they were taking a look at it, but Morty jumps right in and automatically he's already attacked by different monsters and things like that. So Rick eventually comes, saves the day, and then this is where everything starts. So Rick and Morty head back home, and then they're in the living room talking to their family. Their family is asking them a bunch of questions, and next thing you know, Rick and his wife from the past teleport into the living room. So everybody starts freaking out and they're like, what is going on? And Rick and Morty realize that they're actually still in the hole and that they didn't actually come out yet. Okay, so just a little backstory. Rick's wife Diane had died from a futuristic explosive bomb that was due to another Rick. So the trauma that Rick cultivated from this experience caused him to go on a journey to avenge his wife and find the Rick that killed her. So with the old Rick and his wife popping up into the living room, Rick kind of came to the conclusion that Morty's fear was him getting his wife Diane back, because then that would mean that he would no longer need Morty. But Morty realized that Rick's fear might be getting his wife Diane back because of the fact that he would be scared to lose her again. What I really like about this episode is that their fears were really just deep-rooted trauma. The things that they see on their adventures, all the monsters, all of the crazy animals, and just the wild things that they see were really nothing compared to the deep-rooted trauma that they had from situations with people that they knew growing up and things like that. So I really like that perspective because it really showed that the scariest things sometimes are our traumas and our fears. It also kind of shows that you don't really realize what type of trauma that you have until you have an experience that happens and then you start analyzing it from a higher perspective. When you're going through so much in your day-to-day life and you just see so much and you have so much going on, you kind of don't really realize the trauma that you're holding within and certain things that may be bothering you and things that you may have never gotten over until something triggers it. What happened in the episode is that every time that either Rick or Morty would come to the realization of one of their fears, they would teleport back into the hole and then crawl back out to start over and basically rediscover any other fears that they had left. So Morty gets to the point where he is just over it and he's done. He's like, all right guys, this is it. I had fun, it's been great, but I'm so tired of this. I want to leave, I want to get out of this. So he goes back to the restaurant where they went into the fear hole and he finds the same guy in a suit sitting at a booth. He tries to convince the guy to kind of like stop this whole cycle of facing their fears and get out of the fear hole, but the guy ends up having a really deep conversation with Morty, and I love this part so much. So the man tells Morty that it takes a very rare and powerful person to be terrified of happiness. Morty tells the man that it takes a very dumb person. So then the man tells Morty that that's why he's not afraid to be happy, and that the smarter you are, the more that you know happiness is a trap because it doesn't last forever. So then he goes into a bunch of different examples on how happiness doesn't last forever. And I really love this part because it does kind of also show you that ignorance is sometimes bliss, because I do agree that the smarter that you are, the more you do understand that happiness doesn't last forever. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing, because even, for example, he was saying the best case scenario is that you're with somebody and you're in love and you guys die at the same time. So it's just like everything ends because life is not forever. Everything has to come to an end at some point. So in a sense, happiness doesn't necessarily last forever. But if you don't understand that and you are coming from a place of not having that knowledge, then you'll get caught up in being attached to certain things and certain outcomes because you're not expecting them to end and you're not ever really fully prepared. So after that conversation, Morty ends up going back home, and then he finds his dad in the kitchen trying to kill this huge spider, and Morty grabs the spider and then eats it, thinking that that's gonna help one of his fears. So his dad just starts freaking out, and he's like, Morty, that was not normal, and he's getting all scared and everything. And then Morty realizes that one of his fears is actually not being accepted. So what Morty does is he goes back to his high school and then faces a bunch of just embarrassment to try and overcome his fear of not being accepted. So eventually it gets to a scene where Morty is on stage and he's fully naked and he looks really skinny and just not good, and everybody's kind of just like staring at him and looking at him, and he's like freezing up, and I think he eventually like fainted or something. But this caused a ripple within the reality, because on the opposite end, Rick was still with Diane. They were going out, getting drinks, having a good time, talking, and they realized that something was going on with Morty because Diane started glitching. So they went to the school and found Morty on the stage, and they were like, what is going on? And Rick was telling Diane that he's afraid that he's going to have to let her go, and that means that he's gonna lose her again, but he knew that he had to do it in order to save Morty. Rick is on the stage with Morty naked so that he's not embarrassed and he's not the only one, in order to help him conquer and overcome his fear of being judged. So eventually everything works out and they overcome that fear. So then they go back into the hole to crawl back out, and then Rick is looking super sad because he had to lose Diane again. And then Morty looks at Rick and tells him that I believe that one of my fears is being responsible for your sadness. So they go back in the hole and crawl back out, and then Rick tells Morty that he's afraid of Morty knowing anything before him. They go back into the hole again, crawl back out, and then Morty tells Rick that he's afraid that Rick will never admit that he's afraid. So they go back in, crawl back out, and then Morty tells Rick that one of his fears that he thinks that Rick has was him being unsure about something even though he feels certain about it. So they went back in to crawl back out. So when they crawl back out, this part was funny because another one of Rick's fears was like consumerism, because they went to this restaurant and the guy, he was like, oh yeah, it's $8 for an extra side of fries. And then they went back in the hole and they realized that that was another one of their fears. And then Morty was like, come on, are you serious? And he was telling him like, oh, this is just the underlying reason to a much bigger problem. And they started going into it. So they got into it a little bit and they started thinking, and they realized that one of the fears may be the uncertainty of them actually having escaped the fear hole completely. So they try to calm their mind and release any doubts about them still being in the hole and try to move on with life normally. So they go back home, they're living their life, and then it goes to like different montages and scenes and like compilation of them growing up, living their life as the years went by. And then Morty one day looks into the mirror to see that he looks just like his dad and realizes that one of his greatest fears is becoming his dad. So they end up going back into the hole to come out, and Rick is there waiting for Morty, and Morty realizes that his fear was actually that Rick doesn't really care about him as much as he thought, and that if he did fall into the hole that he wouldn't even have jumped in after him. So Rick tells Morty that he never actually jumped in after him, and this is basically where the episode ends. Rick goes, he looks at the hole, I guess he's just kind of thinking about it, he's kind of curious, he's like, oh, maybe I should jump in, but Morty was telling him like, you do not want to do that. So Morty takes a picture of Rick and places it on the Hall of Fame because he made it out. And I was reading some things about this episode. Some people were saying that they probably never really left the hole. I don't know because of the way that it ended. So I really did like that with each scene and with each problem that arises, that they would have to take the time to stop and really reflect on the situation to see what aspect of themselves feared whatever it was. Which honestly wasn't something that they would probably do on a regular day. It was really only because of the fact that they went into the fear hole knowing that they were going to conquer their fears, that they actually took the time to stop and reflect on their trauma. And this is something that most of us do on a day-to-day. We get so caught up in our day-to-day routine in our life that we don't actually stop to reflect on what things may be hindering us, what things may be holding us back, and certain trauma that we may have that's repressed and unhealed. In my personal opinion, with my experiences, I have found that facing a fear does help you to conquer it and overcome it. because a lot of the times when you have a fear, it stops you from even being in proximity of whatever that fear is. So say you have a fear of embarrassment, you probably risk going out in public often. You probably try your best to be hidden and not seen. And say that you have a fear of love, you probably stay away from relationships. You probably have a fear of abandonment, so you probably don't really get too close to people. There's a lot of different things, but most of the time I have noticed that when people have a certain fear of something, they stay away from it instead of facing it and conquering it head on, because that's really the best way to overcome a fear, is to actually see that there's really nothing to fear within whatever the situation is. So I do believe that facing a fear head on really helps you to conquer it, because of the fact that you are experiencing it. And when you don't have as much experience in something, you tend to be a little scared of it and you tend to shy away from it, especially when you don't understand something. Most people fear what they don't understand. So when you don't understand where a fear is stemming from, or you don't understand why you feel the way that you feel about a certain situation, it does kind of give you that sense of hesitancy from, you know, getting anywhere near it, experiencing it, because you don't understand and you're scared, which is where fear comes from. But the best way to conquer it really is to just face it and overcome it. So I really did like that they went through this whole and they were just facing all of their fears. Once you really start facing your fears head on, you start getting to a point where you are just strong in yourself, and you start developing your confidence and your self-esteem, and you get to a point where you just know that you can handle anything that comes your way and you can take on anything, especially after facing your greatest fears. And in all honesty, our fears really just hold us back from doing a lot of the things that we want to do, and from being who we want to be at times too. You start getting to a place where you start taking on these challenges and these fears with ease, which is a really good place to be at in life, because then you know that no matter what happens to you, you can overcome it. This is also why I really love Rick and Morty, because a lot of their episodes do have hidden messages and meanings, because that show is really about different philosophies, different universes, things and different aspects about life. So it is a really deep show if you really get into it. I'm probably going to do another episode of Rick and Morty, but I would have to see what other episode I would want to do. So if you guys have any suggestions, or you have any suggestions on another cartoon that you would like me to interpret, leave it down below. I did some other ones too. I did Winnie the Pooh, and I also did, it was SpongeBob, yeah. So go and check those out as well. But I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Share, subscribe, like, and I will see you guys in my next one. Peace out and much love.
Look at the streets, you are not my mate. If you become a chef, not be head of state. But my people then go say, I know one bite, I know one die.